So they have this crazy anti-Semitic displays who are thinking they are
Didn't even know for how long they would be in solitary. Had no idea how long they had been in solitary for. You're showing us your hands, so at least you don't have handcuffs on them anymore.
You're right, but I still have bruises. You know, they did a weird thing. I have an Apple Watch, and they put the handcuff on right over the Apple Watch, which was sort of weird. And so they made it really, really like as tight as they could get it. And I'm not whining, but I mean, you're joking about my cuffs are off, but I still have bruises there because they like the cuffs get so tight anyways. And for there to be this big glass and metal thing, I was worried the watch would break. Listen, I'm not crying. I'm just saying it wasn't really pleasant to have that thing on for an hour.
Everybody knows that you were arrested for crossing the street to interview protesters at a pro-Palestinian protest, hauled off and then just let go later. And the underlying idea being that they do this to interfere with journalism at the time under the pretext of inciting a mob, as if the violent mob reacting to a journalist, you arrest the journalist. I think everybody knows the context, so please go ahead.
Yeah, and by the way, I wasn't even there to interview the mob because I had talked to them a week ago or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, and there's really nothing interesting they have to say. I just really wanted to film. They had this bizarre sort of display, like a reenactment of Yahya Sinwar's final moments. They had like a chair covered in blood. They had the initials YS on it, and they had some guy in it with like a keffiyeh as a mask. So I thought, this is really creepy. It's in a Jewish residential neighborhood. There's no Israeli embassy nearby. There's nothing to protest against other than there's Jews everywhere. So they have this crazy anti-Semitic display that is so pro-Hamas, like they're reenacting it. And I just want to take photos of that because I couldn't believe it. They said to me, your mere presence here is causing a disturbance. I said, I am not causing a disturbance. I'm not inciting anything. I live in the neighborhood, by the way. I really wasn't even interacting with them. And you could hear people shouting, Jews, Zionists, like just, that was the reason. And you know, that's rude for those folks to say. I don't think it's illegal. It does become illegal when a cop says, oh, for anti-Semitic reasons, the Hamas people want the Jew out. I will now go enforce that. No, you can't do that. The police has to be neutral. And can I tell you about this court case?
Yeah, please.
Boy, it's on point. It's called Fleming versus Ontario. And Fleming was a guy who went to, there was a dispute over land. There was Indigenous people versus other people, and protester, counter-protester. It's not that important, but Fleming was on one side of the divide, and he had a big Canadian flag with him. And then some counter-protesters sort of came towards him, and the cops did what they are doing more and more these days, are taking the path of least resistance. Just like on Sunday, it would have been easier to arrest me than to tamp down 20 excitable pro-Hamas people. Mm-hmm. With Mr. Fleming, the cops found it a lot easier just to jump him, drop him to the ground, take his flag, and arrest him rather than handle a bunch of these folks who were really excited. And the Supreme Court ruled 9-0, which is, it does happen, but boy, that's a show of force. Unanimously, the Supreme Court of Canada said you cannot arrest someone who is doing nothing unlawful. If a guy is not breaking the law, if he's just there, you cannot arrest him because other people might get disturbed or the public crowd and, you know, revved up. I forget the exact language of the ruling. It's in front of me. He had a successful lawsuit against them, by the way, for false arrest and police brutality. But the larger point was you're not allowed to just scoop someone up and arrest him because other people are excitable. You've got to actually do your job, or don't do your job, I suppose. Let the beating take place. But you can't arrest the guy who's being lawful. That feels so on point with my case, except for one thing, Viva. I actually wasn't even part of the protest. Like I said, I was there. I introduced myself to the cop as a journalist. I said, I'm here to take pictures of that display. He actually walked me there for a moment and then walked me back and then let me go. So I clearly was at liberty. But another cop didn't like the fact I was badgering him a bit and I was challenging him a bit. One of the cops said, I am the law. I said, you are not the law, sir. You're a servant of the law. It's a different thing.
Let me see if I can bring this up.
Well, yeah, because you're inciting this crowd and then it breaches the peace.
You're inciting it breaches the peace.
That's exactly what you're trying to do.
I'm a Jew.
No, because you're trying to incite.
I haven't tried to incite them. I want to take a picture of the hate crime that
you
you're
could have done it on
abiding.
the other side. You didn't need to walk over.
No, I wanted to go out. I don't
now I'm going to tell you to
move.
move over there.
And
if you don't press
I want to get to the part where you say I'm your boss.
You're refusing to leave?
I'm refusing to leave.
Why?
Because I'm a Jew I'm a citizen, and I'm your boss. And I don't leave because you say Jews aren't
But you know
allowed on
what?
the street.
In the interest of keeping peace here and public safety, you're under arrest for breach of the peace.
All right, there you have it.
And when I said I was a Jew, my point was that's exactly what Hamas people were calling out. I generally don't lead with the fact that I'm Jewish. It's part of who I am, and I am proudly Jewish. But my main identity is I'm Canadian. I'm a journalist. I'm a pro-freedom activist. And I was there in my capacity as a journalist, but the Hamas mob said, Zionist, Jew, get out. And I'm saying, no, I'm a citizen. I'm a Jew. And by the way, I'm a taxpayer. That's my neighborhood. I have every single right there is. And by the way, cops who are thinking they are, high priests, they're wrong. They work for us, not the other way. I think when I said that last word, you work for me. Oh, that cop hated that. And he said, you're under arrest for breach of the peace. No, sorry. Arguing firmly but politely with the cop is not breach of the peace. And I heard last night that cop, his name is Officer McDuff. I heard that he has been reassigned. Every week he goes to this protest because every single week there's a pro-Israel, pro-Canada march on the one side of the street. And for the last month, there's been a pro-Hamas march on the other side. And that same cop, McDuff, is in charge of it. I heard last night that after, 20 million people saw his arrest of me, that the Toronto police thought, well, let's just redeploy him somewhere else. So we'll see if that's true. I'm going back on Sunday, of course, because it's my neighborhood. Like I go to that shopping mall. It's a little mall. There's a grocery store called Metro there. There's a Wimpy's Diner there. I sort of like that mall. It's a little tired, but it's a fit for me. It's my neighborhood. I'm not being run out of my neighborhood because a bunch of Hamas thugs say, he's a Jew, officer, get him out of here. Sorry, no.
The analogy, which many people might not appreciate, it's like arresting the attractive girl with a short skirt at a bar because guys are saying they're going to sexually assault her. I can't think of a material difference. People are going to say it's a protest. Everybody has to stay on their respective sides. To that, the answer would be, I'm a freaking journalist and I'm exercising not just lawful activities, but constitutionally protected activities. And if they decide to sucker punch me, you don't arrest me because my mere presence there is going to get me sucker punched. The question is this, Ezra. I mean, I don't know if you knew or if you know now, did they get permission to protest if that's what you have to do? Or was it sort of a spontaneous protest?
I've heard that they don't have a permit. They're standing right there on the public sidewalk. It's not like they booked off an area. The police let some people by on the pedestrian sidewalk. If it's relevant, the building right next to the sidewalk is a Royal Bank. I'm a customer there. So don't tell me I can't go on the sidewalk near my home, near the mall where I shop, near my bank, because people who come in from out of town to come and harass Jews. It's a Jew baiting weekend. It's a weekly university encampment. It's like that Columbia University encampment every week, and the police are there. It's the concierge. There's about 100 Jews, because I say it's right in the heart of a Jewish neighborhood, and there's about 20 Hamas activists who come in all from the greater Toronto area. There's probably 50 to 100 cops, so it's not like things are out of control. So when the cops said, oh, I'm removing you for your own safety, no, you're not. Even in that moment, there was a wall of cops between me and the Hamas people. Now, the funny thing is it's a semi-permeable membrane. What I mean by that is I'm not allowed to go to the Hamas people, but the cops didn't stop them from coming and swarming me and jeering me and saying, Zionists, get out, as I was arrested. And by the way, to arrest someone in Canada, you don't need to handcuff them. You don't need to slam them on the hood of a car. You don't need to take them to the police station. You don't have to publicly humiliate them. You just legally just have to put your hand on their shoulder and say you're under arrest.
Let me just pull up the picture. If it's not yet iconic, and I think it is, in full credit to M. Wickens, I don't care what anybody thinks about you, Ezra. This is pretty badass. Pretty emblematic of the times. I know that the cop is not waving at the protesters. He's, I think, raising his hand for traffic. Am I right about that or wrong?
I don't know who he's waving at there. The traffic is coming from the other side of the picture, and we had the lights, so no traffic. Which I honestly don't know what he was waving at. I don't think it was a political gesture.
No, he's smiling, but maybe that's just because of the absurdity of the situation.
Yeah, you know what? I don't think, to be fair, the cops who frog marched me out of there was not the Officer McDuff. The actual cops, other than putting the handcuff around my watch, which was just weird, they were fine. You know, they were given an order and they were following it, and frankly, I tried to have some banter with them. And what are you going to do? You're in jail for a couple hours. I made a joke about where's my conjugal visit or something. Like I was just trying to keep it a little bit lighthearted. It's weird when you're in jail. They take away your phone. They take away your watch. So you immediately lose track of time. And I don't know if you're like me. I'm sort of hooked on my iPhone and I'm always checking Twitter or whatever. So you're sort of in detox for a bit and you're alone with your mind. I mean, I was only in jail for a couple hours. It was not particularly punitive. I can only imagine what it's like for people like Tommy Robinson, who's a former Rebel News employee who's been sentenced to 18 months in prison. He'll probably serve 9, and they've got him in segregation. He's in solitary because they say it's for his safety. I can only, like, after 2 hours, I was getting a little bit cold turkey because I had no social interaction. Imagine 9 months of solitary. You would go mad.
I've interviewed a lot of the Jan 6ers who have, at least a few of them have been in solitary. Some of them didn't even know for how long they would be in solitary, had no idea how long they had been in solitary for. It's deliberate torture. Let me steel man one of the criticisms, because people could complain if I don't. People fault you for getting into these situations and then setting up a fundraiser, or not even a fundraiser, to raise funds, I guess that's what it's called, so that you can pursue legal action. From a critical perspective, it's a factually true statement. The things happen, you go, whether or not you're looking for trouble, and then you find it, and then you say, well, now I want to call on the community so I can make an example of this. And on the one hand, I say, if you don't like it, don't support it. On the other hand, the world needs this type of activism to some extent. You're a journalist, but there's no, it's not illegal to be something of an activist journalist, or at the very least, a proactive journalist. And I say, when these things happen, you need to raise awareness for this, and you need to make an example out of it. And then segueing into the question is, are you going to take action, or what legal action, if you know of, against Officer McDuffie or whoever the heck else is responsible for this?
Sure. All I was doing there was standing on my own sidewalk, not talking to anyone, wanting to photograph an anti-Semitic display in my neighborhood. And that was called inciting the breach of the peace, and I was arrested for that. I'm sorry, that's not my fault. I put up today a larger video. I forgot that I had my cell phone on the whole time recording everything. And when I was arrested, I sort of lost control of my phone. And I sort of assumed that that video had been lost, but actually it wasn't. We just posted it again today. So your viewers, you can find that it's pinned to my Twitter feed today, Ezra Levant.
That's the 10-minute, 48-second video, right?
Yeah. And you can hear every word I say. And I'm so, frankly, submissive to the cops. I say, can I go there? Will you come with me? Thank you. Okay, let's go. And then I object when he's pushing me away, but I yield. I don't resist arrest. I was only arrested when the cop didn't like me saying, you work for me. That's literally what did it. I was actually removed from the Hamas area by the time that happened. The fact that I'm arrested for what I just described, it's not my fault and it's not my desire. The fact that my colleague David Menzies has been arrested 5 times, let me tell you what those 5 times are. You probably remember the one where Chrystia Freeland, the deputy prime minister, was walking into a building, and David Menzies asked her a legitimate question about why she hadn't criminalized a particular terrorist group called the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. And her bodyguards jumped out of the blue, slammed him against the wall and said, you're under arrest for assault. Oh, David, you planned that.
That was the one, if I'm not mistaken, there was a guy like bumped shoulders with him as he was walking, and then stops and says, assault. It's like, assault.
Oh, they assaulted him. Like, they sort of ran to where he was going. He brushed up against them in the lightest of way. And then they said, you assaulted us. If it weren't for our camera there, David would probably be convicted of assault because those cops were so easily lying. David was arrested the same place I was 2 weeks ago. Like, the cops arrest him for an obvious, I'd say 3 obvious reasons. Number one, they're woke in general. So they have an oppressor-oppressed matrix. And David is a 60-something white man conservative. So obviously he's oppressor, arrested him. More to the point, path of least resistance. David's not going to fight back, as opposed to a mob of Hamas activists, many of whom are not even Canadian citizens. And finally, the political bosses, the mayor of Toronto, the prime minister of Canada, they can do the math. Canada has had a massive demographic change in the last 10 years. There's 2 million Muslims in Canada. Now, thank God, not all are terrorist supporters, but a number of them are. And Melanie Joly, our foreign minister herself, said her riding's demographics compel her to be anti-Israel. Like, they're not even hiding it. But let me throw one more thing to you as a counterpoint. We've done journalism in the UK, in Australia, in America, in France, in the Netherlands. Let me talk about Switzerland. I've gone to Switzerland every year for the World Economic Forum, and they don't credential me. So we applied to get in. They don't let us in their inner sanctum. So we're sort of standing outside the heavily armed castle, and the drawbridge comes down, and some of these VVIPs sort of walk out amongst the peasants where me and our cameras are. There are cops everywhere, and they've got serious semi-automatic rifles. Like they look like counterterrorism police. Davos, this is the World Economic Forum. This is Klaus Schwab's thing. This is the George Soros thing, the Larry Fink thing. This is the masters of the universe are there. There's no bodyguards there. There's Tony Blair, former UK Prime Minister. There's John Kerry. There's all these VVIPs are in the street, and you can walk right up to them. Like I scrummed the CEO of Pfizer. I don't know if you saw that.
Albert Bourla, right?
Yeah.
I love that. I'll see if I can find that while you're talking. How you just stumble across him, walk with him. I think he didn't answer very many questions. Let me
he didn't answer any questions. But so we're standing out there. Basically, I'm calling it a drawbridge. There's this high security perimeter that to get in, you have to be accredited and you have all these name tags. So and so they spend a lot of their time in the castle, I'm calling it, but then they come out into the town. It's a lovely town. It would be like Banff or Aspen. It's a Swiss Alps, beautiful ski town. And we're out there shivering in the cold, and we're trying to visually ID these VVIPs. Some of them will chat with you. Senator Kerry, John Kerry, he'll chat. We probably chat with him 5 times every year. He's just coming and going. He doesn't care. He'll talk to us. Albert Bourla comes out, and I think, oh my God, I know that guy. And we sort of walk and scrum with him, and he tries to get away from us. We don't block him, but we're walking right next to him. We got our microphone right next to him. And the cops, here's my point. The cops are everywhere. They're watching us like a hawk, but they don't say a word. They don't approach. As long as we don't touch the VVIP or threaten them, what do they care? It's politics. It's journalism. They don't care. In Switzerland, I have interviewed pound for pound more serious political leaders than my entire life combined. And the police don't do a thing. Here, yeah, pump it up. Show this a little bit.
Yeah, I just had on mute because it's more the not
yeah, you're right. But so you can see how close I am. Like, actually, I probably inadvertently brush up against him and vice versa. And you could probably see the cops, like you can see some of the barriers there. I call that the drawbridge. You can see we're sort of surrounding him. There's actually 4 of us.
I mean, it wouldn't be comfortable if you're devil incarnate. By the way, you're asking him questions, obvious questions. He doesn't say a word, so nobody's missing anything from the audio.
Yeah, I asked him about myocarditis. I asked him about the efficacy of the vaccines. I asked him about product liability. We asked him about a 2.3. Like, we asked him a lot of good questions. He didn't say a word, but my point to you, only in Canada do you get arrested for that. Well, probably some authoritarian regimes also. I was in the Netherlands. There was a riot, an anti-Semitic riot in Amsterdam about 2 weeks ago. So I flew straight to Amsterdam. I got right into the heart of an anti-Semitic protest, and there were cops with riot shields. They said, "Who are you?" I said, "Rebel News from Canada." And my videographer showed our ID. They said, "Fine, you can go." Like, they were almost rolling out the red carpet. That's how real liberal democracy. I mean, most countries in the world don't arrest journalists. I mean, Turkey does, and Iran does, and Russia does, and I think Ukraine does actually. Canada has arrested 6 Rebel News, me and David Menzies 5 times, 6. And I'm sorry, don't tell me that's me asking for it. No, standing on a sidewalk is not asking for it. And of course I'm going to fundraise. How else am I going to pay for my lawyers? Our legal fees are about $500,000 a year.
No, it's a criticism that people issue, but I say, like, on the one hand, what they're basically saying is shut up and sit down. Don't get involved.
Well, you know what? During the trucker convoy, there was only one shooting. It was a very peaceful. There was no violence across the entire trucker convoy. There was one shooting, and I think you know what it was. An RCMP officer in Ottawa. Like, what are the odds? There were thousands of people there in Ottawa, maybe tens of thousands at the height. What are the odds that the one person who was shot by the RCMP was our reporter, Alexa Lavoie? Shot not with a bullet, but by a riot gun, the wadding of a riot gun.
The tear gas. It was a tear gas canister, a big one. I saw that. I mean, we all saw the wealth that it left. Now, point blank, press credentials, as they're unleashing.
And she's just standing there holding a camera. And we're suing them, and we've got the sort of manual, that like the user's manual for that gun. And not only did he use the gun inappropriately, you don't shoot at a person with the gun. You shoot into, like, at the ground near a crowd. And second of all, he violated the standing orders. They only use that riot gun if things become imminent and riotous. It was just a noisy protest. So the cop violated the manual. You don't shoot that at a human, and he violated his standing orders. There was no cause to use that. You keep that in abeyance for a riot. He shoots our. Now, what am I supposed to do? Oh, well, shucks. Sorry, Alexa. That's just how it is in Canada. Or do you say, not on my watch, we're going to sue these people till kingdom come, and maybe one day they'll stop arresting us? In Australia, we have a super reporter named Avi Amini. He was arrested 5 times. He would go to these Antifa protests. Cops would scoop him up, say the same things they're saying to me. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're inciting a disturbance. Put him in the back of a van, drive him 20 kilometers away, and dump him on the side of the road. So by the time he got back to the protest, it was over. It was clear what they were doing. They were removing the guy who was causing them extra work. We sued them, and finally the Victoria Police apologized to Avi, and now they don't touch him. And I just don't accept the fact that in Canada it's normalized that you can arrest or even, God forbid, shoot or handcuff or beat up journalists who are contrarian. And I think everyone used to know this until about 5 minutes ago, when Justin Trudeau subsidized all the journalists. So everyone is so eager not to offend Trudeau and stop the gravy train. We're one of the very few media in Canada that don't take money from Trudeau. He hates the fact he can't control us. Let me give you an example of the hatred. For some weird reason, Justin Trudeau nationalized the leaders' debates in this country. Like the presidential debates in America, he nationalized the debates for prime minister in this country. Who asked him to do that? In America, it's universities or media consortiums. That's all how it's been in Canada too. No, Trudeau took it over, created an agency called the Debates Commission, and stacked it with his friends. David Johnson, longtime family friend, Craig Kielburger, friend. And surprise, surprise, they banned Rebel News from attending, not from being on the stage.
No, this was the one I was going to raise as one of the good lawfares that you waged, that they asked for when they didn't credential Rebel News to attend the debates. And you say, how are you determining this? Oh, well, we recognize it on a case-by-case basis and willy-nilly decide Rebel News is not going to attend.
So they banned us. Well, what do? Oh, well, I better not get a lawyer. I better not crowdfund a lawyer because someone might call me a grifter. You know what? I'm going to fight for freedom. I don't care what you call me. The very fact that I don't take money from the government and that I'm demonetized from YouTube shows you that I'm the least compromised journalist in the country. So we crowdfunded the money. We hired a lawyer. We went to court and we won. And by the way, we won in our name, but didn't we win for press freedom everywhere? The judge ordered them to credential us and said, you can't pick and choose. You can't select the journalists who are allowed to attend a government event. So 2 years later, they do the same thing again in the 2021 election. But this time they're smarter. They reverse engineer their rejection letter based on that first judge's ruling. So in 2019, a judge says, hell no. You didn't give them proper reasons. You didn't have the rules clear in advance. You didn't have the right person tell them. Boy, they studied that. They must have spent $100,000 on legal advice, because when they rejected us in 2021, they had like an 11-page explanation for why we were rejected. They had huge rules that were so intricate. We went to court. I thought, there's no way. They've had 2 years to perfect their reasons for keeping us out. Bam, we won again. They were ordered to credential us. We sent our journalists there. The ink on the court ruling wasn't even dry. Our reporters asked questions of the prime minister. He says, I don't even talk to you people. I'm not even going to call you a news organization. You spread hatred. He is a menace. And you're damn straight, I'm going to sue him every bloody time. As long as I have money to hire lawyers, I'm going to sue him or this thug cop who says, I'm the law. No, you're not, brother. And if it takes a judge to tell you that, so be it. I was in court this morning. I spent my morning in the Federal Court of Appeal. Why? 5 years ago, I wrote a book called The Libranos.
I was going to ask you to update on the various lawsuits. The Libranos is the book you wrote, published during an election season.
And we published it coincidental with the 2019 election.
And they accused you of having run election ads?
Yeah. And by the way, as you may know, there are hundreds of books about Trump. Hundreds. You probably only know about the 20 most popular ones, but there's probably 100. In Canada in 2019, let me put it this way, there were 24 books about Trudeau, and Canada's about 1/10 the size of America. So there were 24 books about Trudeau.
Only one was
And
critical, though.
that's right. I'm not saying they were all totally tongue bats, but the CBC government state broadcaster wrote a loving book about him. And mine actually was the bestseller of all 24, I'm pleased to say, but it was also the most critical. We advertised it in guerrilla marketing in a lot of fun ways. One of them was we had it looked like lawn signs. It said, it was the cover of the book and it said, buy the book. That's all. It was just that front cover. Yeah, so that's where you buy it, Lebranos.com, and buy the book, and that's what the book looks like. And it was really fun because people actually bought those lawn signs from us. We gave them away for free, but we said, please make a donation. So it was sort of people who were grassroots marketing. It did so well. And I took legal advice before I did that because I didn't want to be afoul of the law. And the law is crystal clear about books. If a book is sold at a commercial price, which mine was, and here's the weird part, would be published regardless of whether there was an election, then it's legal. The books and the promotion of books. So as you can see, that lawn sign was very clear. It just said, buy the book. It didn't say vote this way or vote that way.
It can't get more promotional for a book than buy the book, unless that's code.
That's right. And I did that based on legal advice. Elections Canada, they've put 12 people on this file. It's been 5 years now. Today was our 4th hearing. We had 2 hearings within Elections Canada, then we had a federal court hearing. Today was 3 judges of the Federal Court of Appeal for 3 hours or whatever it was. And I walk in the room and I got 1 lawyer. That's all I can afford. She's a great lawyer though. And there's 4 lawyers for the government and then 4 sort of junior articling students so there are 8 bad guys.
Who, if I may, you can mention the name of the law firm for the government. They go private, right? Is it Gowley?
They do both. They had 2 Justice Department lawyers, and then they had 2 lawyers from a very expensive Bay Street firm called Borden Ladner Gervais.
Ezra, I used to work at Borden Ladner is my alma mater in Montreal.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it used to be called McMaster Mean, and then they merged together with BLG is where I practiced from. I was a
great firm.
Not
cheap,
not cheap, big, and I don't think they're one of the. They call them the 5 sisters or the 3 sisters. It's one of the top 10 firms in Canada. It is the top 10 firm in Canada, and at one point it was the biggest law firm in Canada by number of lawyers. Yeah, not cheap, especially the Toronto rates or the Ottawa rates.
Yeah, they're probably paying $1,000 an hour. And by the way, the lawyers are good, but it's just quite something. You've got the largest law firm in the country called the Justice Department, but that's not good enough for you. So you got 2 Justice Department lawyers plus 2 Borden Ladner Gervais private lawyers, probably billing $1,000 an hour. Plus you got these 4 sort of baby lawyers there. And then on the other side of the courtroom, there's me and my lawyer, but there's also one other group missing, like the dog that doesn't bark, as Sherlock Holmes would say. Where's the Canadian Association of Journalists? Where's PEN Canada? Where's Amnesty International? Where's Canadian Journalists for Free Expression? Where's the Canadian Civil Liberties Association? Because here you have a book. Today at the Federal Court of Appeal, there were 2 main issues. Number one, they convicted me because they said I deliberately planned the publishing of the book to coincide with the election, to which I said, of course I did.
So did everybody else, because it's
all
not
24
really good,
books.
Not good marketing to sell the
books.
book either too far before when there's no election or after the election is over.
All 24 books were published to coincide with the election, and that's not illegal. The law says regardless of whether there is election. I don't even know what that means, but they didn't ask me that. They just asked me, did you plan to coincide with the election? I said, of course I did. And so did the other 23 books. They made up their own rule. You can't plan to coincide. That's not what the law says. And then the second thing is they said this promotion of the book, that lawn sign, even though it said buy the book, they said because it was a mean picture of Trudeau, they hated that picture. They said because it was negative and the association with the Lebranos was negative. By the way, I think he looks great there.
I was going to say it's actually kind of flattering, and none of them look as ugly as they are or should. Let me see who.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I'll be honest.
Right,
I wish I looked like that. And some of those characters are gone, but Trudeau still remains. So the law says promotion of books is allowed, but then they said, well, but it's not really a promotion of a book because it's so negative about Trudeau. It's a de facto ad. Well, sorry, if you're judging the content of book and saying only super neutral books are allowed to advertise, I mean, they were making it up.
Where's the limit, Ezra? Because if I put out a podcast, which is just basically a spoken book that's anti-Trudeau during election, and I'm going to monetize it, Is that the same thing? And if I put
That's
a thumbnail, it says, come watch my show. I hate Trudeau. I've done it.
You are so right. The law was obviously written prior to the YouTube podcast digital era. Books, I mean, frankly, that's sort of an antique thing. Like, you know, in that Star Trek, Jean-Luc Picard, he would read a paper book and it was sort of, oh, wow, he's still got roots to the, you know, old Middle Earth or something. Like, the idea that the law covers books but not digital anything is shows you how goofy it is. But for 5 years, they've been hunting me. Now, you might say, or critics might say, well, why don't you just roll over and pay? And by the way, it would be smart, because you know how much the fine was? You know how much they fined me?
I think it was $3,000.
$3,000. I can assure you we paid more than $3,000 fighting it in court.